The mountain winds were always cruelest in late autumn. They came howling down from the peaks like wolves, snapping branches, stripping color from leaves, and stealing warmth from even the thickest coats. For most villagers, it was a time to stay close to fires, to huddle indoors and speak only in whispers. But for Kavi, 12 years old and too thin for the weather, there was no fire waiting for him at home. Only silence. And the cracked walls of an abandoned goat shed where he'd been sleeping since his father left last spring. He didn't complain. He'd stopped complaining years ago. Since the drought took the family's crops. Since his mother fell sick and didn't wake up. Since his uncle said, "You'll survive if you're smart. Not if you're soft." So Kavi learned to be smart. He bartered odd jobs for bread. Gathered dry dung for fuel. Fetched water before the sun rose so no one saw him. And every day after, he wandered into the mountains, not to escape, but to forget. That's where he was when he first saw her. It was just after noon. The light was sharp. The sky, an endless pale blue. Kavi had climbed higher than usual, chasing the flight of a hawk. He wasn't looking for anything. But he found something anyway. She was standing on a narrow outcrop, all bone and dirt and ribs that stuck out like broken umbrellas. Her coat was once chestnut, maybe gold, but now matted and dark with mud. Her head hung low. One leg was bent wrong. A horse. A wild one. Starving. Barely breathing. For a moment, Kavi didn't move. He had seen dead animals before. Goats. Dogs. A boar once, bloated and twitching with flies. But this was different. This wasn't death. Not yet. This was waiting for it. The horse opened one eye, glassy, sunken, afraid. Kavi took a step forward. She flinched. Another step. She didn't move. Then, another. He knelt beside her, heart pounding. No rope. No branding. No saddle. She wasn't anyone's. Or if she had been, they had left her here to die. A drop of blood clung to her nostril. "Hey," Kavi whispered. "You still with me?" The horse blinked. Twice. That was enough. He untied the scarf from his neck, tore it in half, and pressed it against a gash above her eye. It didn't stop the bleeding, but it made her twitch, which, in its own way, was a good sign. He looked around. The forest was empty. The village too far to carry her. But there was one place. An old barn. Burned halfway years ago, now used by no one. Dry. Hidden. And close enough, if she could move. Kavi leaned in close. "I'll come back," he said. "I'll bring food. And water. You wait." And somehow, she did. It took him 2 hours to gather what little he had. A ragged blanket, half a handful of old lentils, and a rusted tin of water. When he returned, the horse was still there. Barely. But alive. The first night, she didn't eat. The second, she nibbled a bit. By the third, Kavi had named her Syra, after his mother's favorite song. Soft, slow, and nearly forgotten. He visited her every day in secret. Cleaned her wounds. Carried water in stolen pots. Tied pieces of sugarcane from the edge of the fields when no one was looking. Each time, Syra would lift her head a little more. By the end of the week, she stood without falling. By the end of the second, she neighed when she heard him coming. Kavi never told anyone. Not because he didn't trust them, but because he didn't trust what they'd do. In his village, a horse meant property. And if someone saw her, she wouldn't be his friend anymore. She'd be someone's cart puller. Or worse, meat. He couldn't let that happen. So he spoke to her only in whispers. Told her about the stars. About his mother's hands. About how people sometimes leave and sometimes stay, and he didn't know which hurt more. Syra never answered. But her eyes no longer looked dead. They looked tired, but awake. Then, one morning, something changed. He arrived at the barn before sunrise, holding an apple he had stolen from a wedding cart. But the door was open. And Syra was gone. His heart dropped. He searched the clearing. No hoofprints. No blood. No broken branches. Just a silence he hadn't felt in weeks. A cold silence. He turned to run, and nearly collided with the village blacksmith. "What are you doing here?" the man snapped. Kavi didn't answer. His fists clenched. Behind the man, a group of elders were gathered. One was holding a rope. Thick. Frayed. With dried blood on one end. "We saw her tracks," the blacksmith said. "You found that horse, didn't you?" Kavi said nothing. He didn't have to. His silence was answer enough. They grabbed him. Dragged him toward the square. He kicked. Screamed. Bit. But no one listened. Because in a place where food was scarce, a horse was not a miracle. It was meat. And just as they raised the rope, a sound cracked through the air. Like thunder. Like the mountain itself splitting. A neigh. Fierce. Sharp. Wild. Syra. The rope never touched him. Because Syra didn't let it. She charged like a storm through the square, ribs still visible, but her body full of something stronger than muscle, loyalty. People scattered. A clay pot shattered. Someone screamed. She stopped just short of Kavi, her chest heaving, breath hot as fire. The blacksmith stumbled back. The elders froze. Because what they saw wasn't just a horse defending a boy. It was a force they couldn't understand. Kavi stood slowly, placed one hand on Syra's neck, and whispered, "It's okay. You found me." Syra lowered her head. Calm. Solid. The rope in the elder's hand fell to the ground. No one said anything. But everything changed. From that moment on, Kavi and Syra were no longer invisible. They were the boy and the horse from the mountain. Some called her dangerous. Others called her cursed. One woman said she was a ghost, come to drag the village to ruin. But the truth was simpler. People feared what they didn't understand. Kavi was forced to bring Syra into the open, not because he wanted to, but because hiding wasn't safe anymore. He built a small pen behind the crumbling temple ruins. Used broken carts as fencing. Roofed it with tarps stitched from old sacks. It wasn't much. But Syra didn't complain. She stayed close, her eyes always scanning the trees, as if she still didn't quite believe she was safe. Days passed. Kavi fed her scraps, softened grain in water, and massaged her leg every night. Her limp slowly faded. Her ribs softened under new weight. Her coat began to shine, not golden yet, but becoming. And with each sunrise, something grew between them. Not control. Not ownership. But understanding. He didn't ride her. Didn't dare. Not yet. Instead, they walked together through the edges of the village, early mornings, before the markets opened. People stared. Some spat. But no one touched them. Not after what happened in the square. One afternoon, the village headman summoned Kavi. "You can't keep her," the old man said, tapping his cane. "She has no papers. No proof. No value." Kavi stood tall, dirt still on his knees from the morning cleaning. "She's not yours," he said quietly. "She's not yours either." She stayed. The headman frowned. "That won't feed you. Or anyone else. One bad harvest and people will ask why a boy has a horse while their children starve." The words stung. Because Kavi knew the truth. He barely ate. Some nights, Syra's food came before his. Not because he was selfless. But because he couldn't stand to see her hurt again. The threats didn't stop. One man tried to sneak into the pen at night. He left limping. Another tossed a stone. Syra didn't move, but Kavi did. He stood in front of her, arms outstretched, eyes burning. But the worst wasn't the villagers. It was the silence from Syra. Because while her body healed, something inside her didn't. She never neighed. never galloped, never played like the horses Kavi remembered from his father's stories. She was strong, but not whole. Until the day it rained. It wasn't a gentle rain. It was a downpour, sudden, sharp, almost angry. Kavi rushed to cover the pen, slipping in the mud, his hands frozen by cold. Syra stood soaked, unmoving. He dropped the tarp and collapsed beside her, breathless. "Sorry," he muttered. "I should have built better. I'll fix it. I promise." And then, something happened. Syra stepped closer, pressed her forehead to his, and for the first time, she made a sound. Not loud, not wild, just a low, humming breath, like a secret exhaled after years of holding it in. Kavi laughed. Wet, tired, but alive. "You forgive me," he said. And somehow, he knew she did. That night, he dreamt of her running. Not from anything, but toward something. The next day, he tried something new. He fashioned a halter from rope scraps. Didn't force it. Just held it near. Syra sniffed. Paused. Then lowered her head, allowing the loop to slide over her ears. No panic. No fight. Only trust. Kavi didn't ride her yet. But they walked further. Up the old trail. Into the lower ridges. Where the hawks flew and the fog slept in the trees. There, she didn't limp. Didn't flinch. She moved like something remembering what it once was. But even joy has shadows. One morning, Kavi woke to find a letter pinned to the fence. Scratched in red charcoal. "She doesn't belong to you." No name. No signature. Just warning. He burned it. But the feeling stayed. A week later, a trader passed through the village. He had photos. Crumpled documents. A long scar down one arm. And a story. "One of my mares escaped last season during a landslide. Prize stock. Broke her leg. We thought she'd fallen into the gorge." He pulled out a photo. Syra. Before the scars. "If she's here, she's mine." Kavi said nothing. But his fists clenched. His heart pounded like thunder in his throat. The trader came to see her. Syra stood in the pen, still as stone. The man whistled. She didn't move. He approached. She backed away. "Stupid thing, probably forgot," he muttered. "I trained her rough. They said I had to. She was wild. But I broke her in the end." Kavi's jaw tightened. The trader spat on the ground. "I'll be back with the papers. And men. You'll hand her over." That night, Kavi sat beside Syra, shaking. "I won't let them," he whispered. "I promise." She lowered her head beside his. Silent. But strong. The next day, the trader returned. With ropes. And a whip. And 2 men with crates in the back of a truck. But the pen was empty. The tarp fluttered loose. The ground held only fading hoofprints. Leading. Into the mountains. Syra was gone. And with her, Kavi's world cracked open. He had led her into the mountains himself. The night before the trader arrived with ropes and lies. No saddle. No bridle. Just trust. Just a whispered command. Run. But not because you're afraid. Because they don't deserve to keep you. She had looked back once, eyes deep as dusk. And then vanished between the trees. Kavi returned to the village alone. The trader shouted, accused him of theft. "You think she's yours," he roared. "You think kindness buys ownership?" Kavi didn't answer. Because it wasn't about ownership. It was about freedom. The elders argued. Some wanted to search the woods. Others said it was over. The trader left in fury, slamming the truck door, promising to return with officials. But deep down, even the men who disliked Kavi knew. Syra would never let herself be caged again. For 3 days, Kavi climbed the hills alone. He searched the old paths. Called her name. left sugar in the clearings. But the forest only gave him silence. And clouds. On the fourth day, the rain came. It wasn't soft like before. It was furious, thick sheets, deafening thunder, earth-shaking lightning. The kind of storm that rips roofs from homes and carves rivers into the dirt. At dusk, a scream rang out from the northern slope. A child. Then, another. Shouts. Crashes. Running feet. A section of the hillside had collapsed. A landslide. It buried part of the footpath. 3 villagers were missing. And the trail to the orchard was blocked. Kavi ran toward the noise. Mud clung to his legs. He fell. Scrambled. Climbed again. People were shouting. Digging with hands. No one had tools. And then, just as another piece of cliff broke loose, a sound cut through the storm. Not wind. Not thunder. But hooves. Syra. Charging through the rain, coat slick, eyes blazing. She hadn't run away. She'd been watching. Waiting. She skidded to a stop near the edge of the slide. Then turned. Looked straight at Kavi. And neighed. He understood instantly. He grabbed a rope. Tied a loop. Syra leaned down, let him wrap it around her chest. And then, like a trained rescue animal, she stepped carefully onto the unstable slope. Kavi followed. The mud was knee-deep. But they found them, a boy and his father, trapped behind a fallen log, too heavy to lift. Syra pulled. Muscles straining. Breath heaving. The log shifted. The father screamed. The boy sobbed. But they were free. Then came the third voice. A woman, half buried in the muck, unconscious. Kavi's heart stopped. He didn't recognize her at first. Then he saw the red scarf. The baker's wife. Pregnant. He turned to Syra. There were no words. Just eyes. And somehow, she moved again. Into the thick of the slide. Kavi tied the rope around the woman's chest. He climbed back up. Wrapped the other end around Syra's torso. And she pulled. Step by step. Inch by inch. The mud cracked. The earth gave way. But she didn't stop. Even as her legs trembled. Even as blood mixed with rain on her flank. She pulled. And pulled. Until the woman reached the edge. Until Kavi collapsed. Until everything went quiet. And when the villagers turned, drenched, filthy, breathless, they didn't see a wild horse. They saw a hero. No one asked who she belonged to anymore. Because now, she belonged to the mountain, to the rain, to the mud and the wind and the hands she saved. That night, the elders came to Kavi's hut. They didn't bring punishment. They brought food. One placed a hand on his shoulder. She came back for us, he said. But only because you let her go. Kavi nodded slowly. His arms ached. His clothes were torn. But in his heart, for the first time in years, was quiet joy. In the morning, the trader returned. With forged papers. With a lopsided grin. Until he saw the villagers gathered around Syra. Feeding her carrots. Washing her wounds. Placing garlands around her neck. The trader stepped forward. I'm here for my horse. No one moved. He looked at Kavi. You stole her. Kavi looked up. Didn't speak. Didn't have to. Because the village elder, the same man who once said Syra had no value, now stepped between them. She's not yours, he said. She never was. The trader's face twisted. I have law on my side. The elder smiled. And we have something better. What's that? Witnesses. The trader left. This time for good. That evening, as the sun burned low behind the clouds, Kavi walked to the ridge with Syra. They stood together in the golden mist. She pressed her head to his. And for the first time, he whispered not in fear, but in peace. You came back. Weeks passed. Then months. But no one in the village ever saw Syra leave again. Not truly. She came and went with the fog, one morning grazing near the temple ruins, another spotted deep on the ridge by the river. But never too close. Never too far. She was free. And yet, still theirs. Kavi stopped trying to own her. He no longer needed to. What they had couldn't be caged or called. It just was. She appeared when it mattered. She vanished when she wanted. Like a heartbeat, always felt, even when unseen. The village changed with her. Fewer chains. More listening. Children stopped throwing stones at stray dogs. People whispered less about curses and more about courage. And though no one said it out loud, many started watching the ridge before storms, just in case. Just to see if she would come again. Kavi kept growing. So did his hands. Calloused from rebuilding. From planting. From teaching other boys how to carry more than wood. How to carry responsibility. One day, the headman stepped down. Age had taken his legs. The village needed someone new. Someone they trusted. Someone who had faced rain and rock and hunger, and still chosen kindness. And though Kavi refused at first, the vote was already unanimous. They called him the one who listened. He didn't take the title with pride. He took it with quiet care. He didn't speak much in the council meetings. But when he did, people listened. Because they remembered a time when no one had listened to him. Except a starving horse. 10 years later, a filmmaker came through town. She was looking for stories, of old myths and living truths. Someone mentioned the storm. And the horse. And the boy who stopped a whip with his silence. The woman found Kavi sitting by the tree line, sharpening a farming blade. "Do you still see her?" she asked gently. He looked up. Smiled. "Not always with my eyes." She nodded. "Do you mind if I tell her story?" He paused. Then asked, "Will you tell it with silence between the words?" She smiled. "Of course." The short film aired 3 months later. It didn't go viral. But those who watched it never forgot it. One viewer left a comment. "I lost my horse 2 years ago. I couldn't let go. But this story helped me understand. Not all goodbyes leave you. Some stay forever." Years passed. The village grew. Children who had never seen Syra still spoke her name. Some drew her into notebooks. Others tied red scarves to the trees near the ridge, hoping to feel her pass in the wind. And every now and then, when the rain came sideways and fast, when the clouds cracked and the earth trembled, someone would swear they saw a flash of chestnut between the trees. Kavi never confirmed it. Never denied it. But every year, on the night of the landslide, he walked alone to the cliff where he first saw her. He sat. Waited. Listened. And once, just once, as the sun dipped behind the mountain and the wind turned cold, he felt a soft breath at his back. Warm. Steady. Alive. He didn't turn. Didn't need to. Instead, he whispered the only words he'd ever needed. "Thank you." In the village square, they built a statue. Not of Kavi. Not of a battle. But of a horse and a boy, standing beside each other, no ropes, no saddle, no fear. Just stillness. Just trust. At the base, the villagers carved. "She didn't belong to anyone. But she gave herself to us all." And so the story lived on. In quiet nods. In mountain paths cleared for hooves that may never return. In the soft hush of children who learn that not everything needs to be tamed. To be remembered.